61% of all people living with HIV and AIDS. Young girls between the ages of 15 and 24 make up 74% of people living with HIV and AIDS. And if you come to the USA, we're saying 60% of the reported cases through to 2006 by CDC are the black women. And this is a worry for us because we're talking about a group of people who are supposed to provide a link to our next generation. They are the ones that are more infected. We're looking about continuous increase in violence against women. Violence through rape, assault, that will lead to HIV and AIDS, and violence as a cause of HIV. In Africa, there's some countries where you'll be thrown out if you're HIV positive, you'll be accused of killing your husband, you'll be called a prostitute, and in a worst case scenario, you'll actually be killed. In Somalia, you don't come out to say you're HIV positive, you're literally killed. That's the reality of the environment we're working in. And there's an increase in conflict on the continent. And sometimes the conflict is fought on women's bodies through rape, by the rebels, like in the case in DRC today, state militia, and sometimes even peacekeepers. So as they're fighting the war on the battlefront, the war is being fought on the women's bodies. That's the reality. I've reached a point where we're beginning to say, do we just report numbers? Because I think people have become immune to numbers. Do we report the gravity of the rape so people get to see how serious this all is? This is. Now, when we look at the whole universal access thing, we are saying, world leaders had said by 2010, everybody will have universal access to prevention, treatment, and care for HIV and AIDS. We're saying this is not going to happen. This is 2009. A vaccine or a cure for HIV and AIDS is a long way away. If I can just quote an article that was in the Washington Times last month, they're saying scientists will have to take enormous intellectual leaps to develop an AIDS vaccine in the coming years, because they were all clearly frustrated by the recent setback of the most promising vaccine that we had. So the vaccine and the cure are not around the corner, unfortunately. We're saying 2 out of 3 people living with HIV and AIDS who need treatment actually have it. Yesterday, our sister from AU talked about PMTCT, prevention of mother-to-child transmission. 90% of the women who need PMTCT treatment are not accessing it. 1, they don't deliver in the hospitals. 2, there's all this stigma. You might want to know, but then when I know my status, it will be disclosing not to one husband. It's my husband, my family, the whole village. In a case where you're in a polygamous relationship, it will be disclosing to 5 other people. So imagine the stigma that comes with that. So a lot of the women don't want to go to the clinics because when you go, you'll be tested mandatory for HIV. So you don't want to know your status. So you're not going to take the prevention the treatment to prevent your child. That's the reality of what we're dealing with. We're saying only 12% of people living with HIV and AIDS know their status. And I was watching, I think it was CNN the other day, and they're saying the decision not to offer mandatory tests, not mandatory, I mean, I don't know what to do in the state, but then there was something to the effect that by reducing testing within the hospitals, many people are not going to know their status, even in the US. So we're saying only 12% of the people worldwide know they're infected. And that's a challenge. So how do you achieve universal access to treatment if you don't even know that you're HIV positive? And when we look at the whole funding for HIV and AIDS, our governments in sub-Saharan Africa have adopted this Father Christmas mentality, we sit and wait for somebody else to fund the fight. There are countries where 95% of the funding for HIV comes from external. And sometimes I dread to imagine what will happen to a country if one day the US says, okay, Kenya, we're not going to fund you anymore. You've got people on life-saving drugs. We don't see it as a priority. We declared it as a disaster, but nobody is treating it as a disaster. It is. Now, looking at the whole credit crunch, the gift package is reducing, and the challenge is what are we going to do about that? And then there's a whole shift in geopolitics. There's a time when HIV was up there, but today there is, environment, there is a hunger, there's a credit crunch. I mean, everybody's, tightening their belt. But then the challenges of HIV and AIDS haven't gone away. All the situations have just gone to make it worse for the women and the girls. And then currently there's a trend towards criminalizing people who are HIV positive. We're all struggling with HIV. And we're saying if you infect somebody deliberately, we're going to put you in jail. As a pregnant woman, I can be imprisoned in Sierra Leone for infecting my unborn baby. I probably didn't even make that choice to have that baby in the first place. Maybe I was raped. But then I end up in jail for passing on the virus to my child. So it's a complex situation we're dealing with out there. I mean, it really is difficult. But just to come back home a bit, I want to look at the female face of HIV. And for me, it's not a female face, it's a black woman's face of HIV. That's the reality. The organization I work for, we've nicknamed her Motapola. Motapola is just like a campaign voice for every woman who's infected with HIV. We're saying the major marker of all Motapola is their femaleness. She's old, she's young, she lives in the village, she lives in the community, but at the end of the day, she is female. She is poor and black. And in some cases, she has another burden, she is disabled. That's who we're dealing with. But we're saying she's not a victim. I like the plenary session today. She's not a victim. She is strong, proud, loving, and very caring. She knows her own joy and spirit, and she knows what she needs. But often, she is silenced or ignored. Because when the money is being discussed on the table, she's not at that table. Nobody takes time to ask her, how do we address your problems? The issues are just, given to her, but we want to change that. She has a constituent, and she wants to make a change for herself. The kind of change she wants to see out there, she wants to be a part of that change. Now my question is, in Africa we call her Motapola. Our colleagues in India call her Mina. I don't know what we're going to call her in the US, because she's there. I don't know what Europe is going to call her, because she is in Europe as well. Now, there are all these controversies, we've talked about them yesterday. What we know for sure is that women, men and children of minority races and ethnicity are disproportionately affected by HIV. There's no doubt about that. Sub-Saharan Africa, 25 million people of the 33 million people living with HIV and AIDS live in Sub-Saharan Africa. In the US, where the African American constitute 13% of the population, when it comes to HIV and AIDS, they contribute for more than half of the HIV and AIDS cases. That is a fact. We're not disputing that. Increasingly, we're being told in Europe, infections are happening amongst immigrants of Sub-Saharan Africa, so it's still the black person. What we're not too clear about is the why. There's been research saying it's genetics, counter research saying it cannot be genetic. Arguments are going back and forth. Is it sexual behavior? In Africa now we're being told the average African can't have one partner at any given time. So we're being told, because you always have concurrent sexual partners, be safe with the concurrent sexual partners. And I'm thinking, is this where we're supposed to be going to? Because the decision is like, you can't stay with one person by nature of being black. So just keep doing what you do, but do it safe with all the 4 or 5 partners. Do we want to accept that? And then is it just simply a case of trying to prove the unprovable? I don't know. But then that is the reality. But then when we talk, just trying to narrow down a bit on the whole rights issues. We're saying human rights are not divisible. You cannot divide them. When it comes to a person living with HIV and AIDS, the problems increase by the very nature of the fact that they're infected by HIV. So the whole issue of equality and non-discrimination, we've talked about the stigma, discrimination, the right to life. Once you're infected, all of a sudden, you're not supposed to engage in sex, you're not supposed to have children, you're not supposed to, just because you have a virus. And in some cases, it is a crime, so you can actually go be in prison forever. We're saying HIV is a virus, it's not a crime. That's what we're saying. The whole right to health thing, there's been so many declarations on HIV. There's been the United Nations General Assembly, there's been the Abuja, everybody's struggling to deal with this thing. But the reality for us is, the worst affected receive the least attention.